Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have the Game Week 7 preview. In this weekly series I bring you all of the discussion points, dilemmas, different player comparisons for the upcoming game week and do my best to help you with those key FPL decisions. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel, we are fast approaching 30,000 subscribers and I would love to hit that before Game Week 7. So if you've not yet subscribed and you get any value from today's video, please do subscribe. But without further ado, let's jump to today's video. So guys, before we jump into the video, I just wanted to really quickly talk about Fanslide. And if you've watched any of my deadline streams recently, you guys will know that we've been playing Fanslide and I've been hosting a league pretty much every single weekend. If you are new to Fanslide and you've not yet seen it, it's essentially in-play fantasy football. It's completely live, completely interactive, and you can basically slide players in and out whenever you want to. And at all times, you will have 3 players that can earn you points. So you've basically got to decide throughout the game which players you think will do well at specific points. You slide them in either a single, double, or triple point slot. And the more points they get you, the better. And you can get points for pretty much anything from sort of defensive headers, interceptions, tackles, all the way to obviously goals and assists. And it's about trying to time when you own certain players. So for example, you can own defenders at the start of the game and maybe attackers later on in the game when you think there's going to be more goals. So it's a super cool game. We've been playing it very, very regularly with you guys in the league. If you would like to join my league, it's TZEBA. If you click the link in the description and download Fanslide that way, not only will you download the app, but you'll also be entered into my mini league as well. All the games that I play are free to play and there are free to play versions of the game, but you can also enter paid tournaments as well. So if you do enter paid tournaments, please do gamble responsibly. Only gamble as much as you can lose. And as a result, it is 18 plus. But by all means, just feel free to enter the free tournaments as well. And if you do, like I said, join my league code TZEBA. If you do play Fanslide, let me know down in the comments what you think of it. Why not start with the biggest talking point at the moment? Is Mohamed Salah worth it? Should we be selling Salah? Can we still trust Salah with the captaincy? There are a lot of questions around this man at the moment. And the reason is, he has been essentially an FPL king for many years now. So reliable for captaincy, reliable returns almost every single week. And also, what is absolutely massive for captaincy and for FPL, he has that haul potential. Whenever you watch Salah in the past, you know that he can easily just pull a hat-trick out of nowhere or a brace, clean sheet, maybe an assist as well. And as a result, he has been pretty much the most essential player in FPL over recent years. Towards the back end of last season, post-AFCON, his data was actually really strong. And by data, I mean things such as expected goals, shots in the box, touches in the box. By all accounts, it suggested he should have had a really strong end to the season. But we started to see a drop-off in his actual performance and his actual output. And it didn't quite match up with his underlying data. And some people were saying maybe it was a lack of confidence. Maybe it was the result of the disappointment at AFCON. Some people were saying he was fatigued. There was a lot of talk about that. And we went into the fresh season. And I think pretty much everyone thought, you know what? We're going to trust the underlying data. Salah will start to perform once again. And it will show us why he is such a good asset in FPL. But unfortunately, the output hasn't been fantastic. Now, it's worth noting his output hasn't been terrible by any means. But it probably hasn't justified the £13 million price tag. And the fact that he continues to be outperformed by the likes of Haaland and the fact that Kane is starting to look really, really good at the moment, it does pull into question, is it worth paying 13 million for Salah? So what I've got here is I've got their fixtures from Game Week 7 to Game Week 12. And I've also got his underlying data from the last season, the 21-22 season, and what we've got thus far from the 22-23 season. So we've obviously only got 6 game weeks worth of data, whereas last season we've got the full entire season. So do take it with a pinch of salt because it's still not a massive sample size. Starting with the fixtures though, they're really not great. And I think if Liverpool had really good fixtures coming up, I think my initial reaction would be just don't sell him. We know how good he's been in the past. We know what he can do. His underlying data is not bad, as we'll see in a second. But the fact that the fixtures are really tricky, and I think they're actually even trickier than maybe they look at a first glance. Game Week 9 against Brighton on the official FDR and the official website is actually a green fixture, but I can't make Brighton a green fixture. They're a really good defence and a really good outfit, and I do think that'll be a tricky game for Liverpool. So realistically, Wolves at home is the only fixture where you'd say, you know what, I do back Salah to do quite well there. Chelsea, Brighton, Arsenal, City, West Ham. It's really not great. Yes, Chelsea have been a little bit suspect defensively and the same for West Ham as well. But generally, as a group of 6 fixtures, they are not very nice fixtures. And I think if you are looking to sell Salah, if we're looking just at the fixtures, now is probably the time to do so. And I think especially with a lot of people looking at wildcarding between Game Week 7 and Game Week 9, I think if you are going to sell him, I would do it now rather than waiting 4 or 5 weeks and then looking to sell him. But the question is, do I think you should sell him, right? So looking at the 21-22 season, He averaged 78 minutes per appearance. And as you can see here, expected FPL points at 8.34. His non-penalty expected goal involvement sitting around 0.63. Depends what site you look at. A lot of people have it down at around 0.55, etc. But by all accounts, a really high non-penalty expected goal involvement. And his expected assist is 0.43. So we're looking at around a 1 expected goal involvement per 90 for Salah, which is absolutely exceptional data. And it shows why he was such a fantastic asset last year. And like I said, even after AFCON, yes, his actual output decreased. He didn't score as many goals, didn't get as many assists, but he was still exceptional from an expected sort of perspective, which would suggest that he was getting into some good opportunities to score and assist, but they weren't actually transpiring into actual returns. However, this season, as you can see, his expected FPL points have dropped off to 5.56. His non-penalty expected goal involvement has dropped off from 0.63 to 0.38. And his expected assists have dropped off from 0.43 to 0.29. So by all accounts, Salah's underlying data is still pretty decent. We're still looking at a 0.67 expected goal involvement, which is very, very good. Does that justify the £30 million price tag? Maybe not, but that is better than most outfield players that you would expect to see. And also, we know that Salah can maintain that. There are some players this season which will have a much better expected goal involvement, but you wouldn't expect them to maintain that over a season. Salah has shown for 5 seasons in a row now, he can maintain at least a 0.67 expected goal involvement. So by all accounts, Salah putting up really good data. But there is a drop-off. And as you can see, even in things such as touches in the box have gone from 10.92 per 90 in the previous season to 9.17 per 90 this season. Shots in the box from 3.65 per 90 to 2.33 per 90. So it essentially looks like he's just less involved. And I think that is what you get from the eye test as well. If you're watching the Liverpool games, he's not in the box quite as much. He looks a little bit wider. He's dropping a little bit deeper. He's not getting those clear-cut opportunities that he did last season. And I saw someone, apologies, I can't remember exactly who said this, but it perfectly summarised it. Basically said that Salah just doesn't look like the sort of player that is going to get you a massive haul at the moment. Looks like the sort of player that, yeah, you could imagine Salah will pop up with a goal or an assist. But last season and in previous seasons, every time you watch Salah, you think he's unlucky not to have scored a hat-trick. He gets so many opportunities and he's so involved in everything Liverpool do. And I just don't get that vibe this season from looking at the eye test and looking at the data. He just looks like a bit of a bystander at points. Now, we've discussed reasons for this. Is it the absence of Matip potentially influencing Trent? And Trent has been pretty poor this season. Is that then influencing Salah? Or is it the absence of Mane? Or is it just a little bit of a dip in form, which we do see with players sometimes? And again, the data's not bad by any means. He's just not hitting the heights that we've seen in the past. So I'm not going to hypothesize too much about the reasoning behind it. What I would say is there is a notable drop-off in Salah's underlying data and his actual output, and there is justification at least to sell him. Now, would I sell him? Probably not yet. I would be giving him the next 2. I'm looking to wildcard in game week 9. I'm going to give him the next 2 weeks, and I believe there's also 2 Champions League games before game week 9 as well. So we should get 3 or 4 games of Salah before we wildcard in game week 9, a lot of us. I'm going to give him probably both of those games in the Premier League. The reason for that is twofold. The first is we do know what Salah can do. A lot of people will call it fear or fear of missing out or anxiety about the fact that he can haul. But you have to give some weight into previous seasons. We've only had 6 game weeks worth of data this season. In previous seasons, he has demonstrated that he is an exceptional FPL asset, putting up good data and has the ability to turn it on at any point. Do I want to bet against that at the moment? Not particularly. And that brings me on to the second reason. The reason I don't currently want to bet against Salah is I just don't think there are that many viable alternatives. I don't really want Son at the moment. I don't particularly want De Bruyne, especially when they've got Tottenham in game week 7 and I've already got Haaland. I don't particularly want De Bruyne. Do I want Bruno Fernandes? Maybe a bit of a pump, but I'm not necessarily confident that Bruno outscores Salah. Do I want Sterling? Sterling's maybe one that I would consider, but all of these premiums that you can have outside of Salah, I'm just not that convinced by. Yes, you could switch the funds and go for Kane and Haaland, which I think is slightly nicer, but again, that's going to require 2 transfers. Do I want to make 2 transfers, which would be a -4 hit to take out Salah to get Kane? Probably not. And then the other alternative you have is spreading the funds. But again, I don't like doing that because it could quite easily be that in the next 2 weeks, Kane, Son, Kevin De Bruyne, Salah, Bruno, Sterling, all of them start to turn it on. And all of a sudden you're thinking, damn, I wish I had a 2 premium structure. I wish I could get back to one of those premiums pretty easy. So I don't like spreading the funds for that reason. So I'm left in a position where because the other premiums haven't impressed me that much, because I know what Salah can do and the data's still not that bad, and he can just turn it on at any point with penalties, decent underlying data, decent output in the past, all of those reasons, I'm just not that keen to sell Salah at the moment. But if you were asking me, is there justification to sell Salah? I think with the fixtures they've got coming up and with the slight dip in underlying data and his actual output, yes, there is justification to sell Salah. But for me, it's probably not going to happen for the next 2. Let's reassess in Game Week 9. When I play my Game Week 9 wildcard, there'll be loads of content on that, don't you worry. When I play the Game Week 9 wildcard, maybe we'll reassess and maybe we'll wildcard without Salah, because I think Brighton, Arsenal, City and West Ham, I think you could definitely justify going for someone else and then maybe moving back to Salah when their fixtures clear up in Game Week 13. Let me know what your current thoughts are on Salah down below. Do you currently own him, yes or no? And if you do own him, are you looking to potentially sell him either now or in Game Week 9, or are you just going to keep faith with the Egyptian King? So guys, I think maybe the second biggest talking point at the moment, outside of whether to keep Salah, sell Salah, captain Salah, etc., is around budget strikers. I think a lot of us are starting to realise that maybe switching to a 3-striker formation is probably optimal, and I do genuinely think so. I think if it's easy enough for you to do, get it done. And I think definitely on Wildcard, I've built a couple of Wildcard drafts for Game Week 9, and all of them have 3 strikers. And I did say this at the start of the season. This is why you don't take too much from previous seasons with respect to narratives and trends, such as strikers aren't very good in FPL and we'll never want 3 forwards ever again, because things change season by season. And this season, there are lots of viable forwards that we can have. So what I've done here is I've just compiled some of the sort of cheaper strikers up to the most expensive being Watkins at 7.3. And I just thought we'd compare them. What I'm going to try and do is cover just what they've performed like thus far. Hopefully that will give a bit of, for those of you that need like a 2-week punt and you're going to wildcard in Game Week 9, hopefully this will still be helpful. And for those of you that are wildcarding now, or maybe you've already wildcarded and you want a longer term player, hopefully this will be useful as well. For this table, what I've got is I've got their price, I've got their minutes, so you can tell if we're taking from a very small sample size. So for example, Mopé's only played 90 minutes, so I wouldn't take too much from that. We've also got their projected points from Game Week 7 to Game Week 12, non-penalty expected goal involvement, and the fixture difficulty too. Everything that I've used in this video and everything that I use for every video this season will be coming from Fantasy Football Hub. It's a brilliant site with all of the tools you'll need to succeed in FPL. So if you want up to 30% or 30% off at the moment from Fantasy Football Hub, for as little as £2.10 per month, you can get access to pretty much every tool on their site. Second link in the description will take you there. It is an affiliate link, so it does support the channel, but also you get access to all of the underlying data and fixture tickers and everything that you might need for the season. So I'm not going to talk about every player in detail because this video would be about 2 hours long, but just to note a couple of things. So Solanke and Johnson, both 2 really good cheap options, but slightly disappointed with the data for both of them. As you can see, 0.39 non-penalty expected goal involvement for Solanke, 0.22 for Johnson. I think what works in favour of Solanke is he is definitely on penalties. He's very much nailed. And also the fixture difficulty is so fantastic. They're first from an attacking perspective from Game Week 7 to Game Week 12. So by all accounts, I like for that reason Solanke. I do still like Johnson, but the data's by far and away the poorest on this list. So I would maybe say look outside of Johnson for now. However, the Fantasy Football Hub algorithm actually has Johnson as top for projected points out of all of the players on this list. So maybe someone that we're expecting to improve in the future, and based off past seasons, maybe would expect his output to start to increase. The one that I did want to draw your attention to at that cheaper price is Bryan Mbeumo. 0.68 non-penalty expected goal involvement. Yes, rightly so, Tony is grabbing all the headlines, both in FPL and just in general Premier League at the moment. And like I said, rightly so. But Mbeumo is putting up some decent numbers there. And maybe if you can't afford Tony, or you just want a couple, like a 2-week punt over the next couple of weeks before you wildcard in Game Week 9, I don't mind Mbeumo. 482 minutes, he's very much nailed. 21.2 projected points isn't great, but 0.68 non-penalty expected goal involvement, I think is decent. Longer term, Brentford don't have the best fixtures, so this is more of a short-term punt, but I don't mind that. And Mopé is also putting up really good numbers, but it was 1 game. But he put up a 0.78 non-penalty expected goal involvement. So take it with a pinch of salt, only being 90 minutes, but I do think that at some point this season, if he's nailed on in that Everton side and Calvert-Lewin doesn't come back or he's injured further, I do think Mopé will be a decent option in that Everton side. And I think we're starting to see improvements in the Everton team under Lampard, especially over the last few games. But for now, I think just with the fixtures, due to the fact that we need to see how he settles in, I think there are probably better options than Mopé. You've then got sort of 2 options which are putting up decent numbers and I think will be good options at some point. That is Che Adams and Welbeck. But I just think for now, there are players putting up better underlying data with better fixtures. And I think maybe I would look outside of Adams and Welbeck. That being said, if you're just looking for a 2-week punt, I don't mind either of them because the fixtures are actually decent for the next 2 for Adams and for Welbeck. So I definitely think you could do worse than them. But I do also think there are slightly better options on this list. I do always just think that Welbeck's a fantastic option. And last season, he was putting up really good underlying data as well. And Adams, when you get Adams in a hot streak, when he's scoring goals, he can be a fantastic asset. But I think for now, I would probably look outside of those 2 players. And that brings us on to the players with the best underlying... Well, actually, let me do Watkins first. Watkins isn't an option for me. Yes, the fixtures are actually pretty decent over the next 3 or 4 for Villa. His underlying data is just not good enough, and it's never been good enough. Even last season... ever since we've got underlying data for Watkins, it's pretty much consistently around 0.35 to 0.4 expected goal involvement. It's just not good enough for me. Yes, he does tick along, and yes, he will score goals, but there are definitely players that have more explosive potential and have the ability to score more goals than Watkins. So for now, Watkins would be an avoid. And it basically comes down to, in my opinion, I think in the opinion of a lot of you, the best three options at the moment, and that is Mitrovic, ISAK, and TONEY. If I were to pick three strikers at that sort of budget mid-price range, it would be Mitrovic, ISAK, and TONEY. Mitrovic is just exceptional at the moment. He's got the joint most minutes, so he's pretty much played every minute available for Fulham at 539. Pretty good for projected points. 0.87 non-penalty expected goal involvement, and he's on penalties. He's on penalties plus 0.98 expected goal involvement, and he's got the fourth best fixtures on this list from an attacking perspective. So by pretty much every account, eye test, underlying data, projected points, minutes, fixtures, Mitrovic is the one to go for me. If you were asking for one striker, it has to be Mitrovic for me. I think he's definitely the one to go for. TONEY is a very, very similar story. 540 minutes. He's literally played 90 minutes in every single game available. 25.2 projected points. And he's putting up very close to what Mitrovic is at 0.81 and non-penalty expected goal involvement. So really good for TONEY as well. The thing that puts me off TONEY slightly more than Mitrovic is just the fixtures. I think the fixtures are starting to turn worse for Brentford as they're starting to turn better for Fulham. But again, if you're looking over the next 2 weeks, I prefer TONEY to Mitrovic. If you're looking longer term, or maybe you're on your wildcard now, or maybe you're just thinking about you're saving your wildcard, I would go for Mitrovic. So it really depends what you're looking for here. I don't think you can realistically go wrong with either, though. They're both putting up really good non-penalty expected data, plus they're both on penalties, right? ISAK is putting up the best data on this list, but again, only 153 minutes. But what we've seen from ISAK in those 153 minutes is really promising. 0.98 expected goal involvement per 90. He looks like he's going to be a serious FPL option. And I think even once Wilson's back, I think Wilson and ISAK will play alongside each other. That might even make ISAK a better option. So I think if you're looking for a slightly puntier pick that isn't necessarily backed up by the data because we don't have a large enough sample size, ISAK is definitely one on my list. So at the moment, if I were wildcarding, Haaland's on my list for sure. Mitrovic would have to be. That third striker would probably be one of ISAK or just Solanke due to the price. So just due to how cheap he is, I would be tempted by Solanke and due to the fixtures as well. But I would be very tempted by ISAK as well. So let me know down below, what is your current strike force looking like? Who are the strikers you're interested in? The three best budget strikers on this list is definitely Mitrovic, ISAK and TONEY, which you probably didn't need me to tell you at the start of this video. So there were also lots of questions around when to wildcard, and we did discuss this a few weeks ago, but I thought I'd address it and just give you my updated thought process, and especially for those of you that didn't watch the video if you're new to the channel. So essentially, since the start of the season, and I do maintain this, and I don't think it's necessarily plan continuation bias, I don't think it's me being locked in on a plan, I still think this is the best option. I am going to probably be playing a Game Week 9 wildcard. The reason for that, for those people that have been wondering why content creators and just FPL managers all over Twitter are so keen on a Game Week 9 wildcard, there's a few decent reasons. The first is it's an international break. So when we're bored over the international break, it gives us a little something to do, something to tinker with. That isn't the main reason, though. With an international break, of course, there are often quite a few injuries. Maybe a few players play like 90 minutes in 2 or 3 games, and maybe you don't want them in your team. It's just a good opportunity to react to anything that goes wrong in the international break. So that's always a nice reason. Also, because it's a longer period, sometimes you can catch more price rises and price falls, and you can maybe build up your value a little bit better. That doesn't always work, because often FPL managers don't think about their teams over the international break. So it doesn't always work that way, but sometimes it can. But I think maybe the main reason, not the reasons I've listed there, is the fixture swings. So in particular, Brighton, Arsenal and Leeds, but specifically Brighton and Arsenal, their fixtures really turn for the worst, and to some extent Liverpool as well. So I'm currently looking at, with all of my wildcard drafts I've built, I've got a maximum of 1 Arsenal player, I've got no Brighton players, and most of them I only have 2 Liverpool. So I'm looking at dropping 2 Brighton, 3 Arsenal, and 1 Liverpool from most of my drafts. That's a big fixture swing for me. And the likes of Leicester, Palace, West Ham, Fulham, and Bournemouth, they're just 5 teams to list. There are more. Have really nice fixtures from Game Week 9, and I don't own players from any of them. I don't own Andreas, Mitrovic, Solanke, Fornals, Scamacca, Antonio. Obviously, the Palace defence, Zaha, Maddison. There are some really nice players to jump on that have really nice fixtures from Game Week 9. So just all of those reasons there, the international break, maybe catching some more price rises, being able to react to anything that happens in the break, and also just catching those fixture swings and maybe jumping off of the template, getting rid of those Arsenal players, maybe getting rid of a Luis Diaz, getting rid of Sanchez, Estepinian, Pascal Gross, etc., and jumping on some of the more exciting players from those other teams. It just looks like a really good time for me to wildcard anyway. I'm going to jump now to third place, the third best wildcard time in my opinion, which is probably like now or Game Week 8. there's not a massive difference between wildcarding now, game week 7, or game week 8 in comparison to game week 9. The big thing that I note is probably Arsenal, because Arsenal have Everton and Brentford, I believe. Let me just double check that so I'm not lying to you. Over the next two, yeah. Everton and Brentford. You're probably going to want Arsenal assets for Everton and Brentford. And Liverpool have Wolves this week, followed by Chelsea. So it might be a week too early to drop your Liverpool assets, and it might be 2 weeks too early to drop your Arsenal assets. And even next week then, you've still got your Arsenal assets against Brentford. So you've got a decision to make. If you wildcard now in game week 9, do you hold on to your Arsenal assets, or do you ditch them a couple of weeks too early? You might say, I wanted to hold on to Martinelli and Jesus anyway on my wildcard, in which case then there's not a huge issue there. And then in game week 8, you've maybe got less of an issue because Liverpool play Chelsea. So that's maybe a decent time to drop your Liverpool and to drop your Chelsea assets. So I probably prefer game week 8 to game week 7, but what I'm essentially saying here is I don't mind playing it before game week 9, but just due to the perfect fixture swings that we get for teams going in and out, and due to it being an international break, I personally prefer game week 9 to playing it now or in game week 8. And then with game week 13, the reason I've got that listed as the second best wildcard time for me is due to the fixture swings that we've just spoken about. So in game week 9, Liverpool and Arsenal have really tricky fixtures. They're the two main teams. So do Brighton. So do a couple of other teams, maybe a Chelsea. Spurs' fixtures aren't great. So a couple of the big teams have pretty tricky fixtures from game week 9 to game week 12. In game week 13, though, they all start to turn for the better. So Arsenal, Spurs, Liverpool, etc., all have some really nice fixtures from game week 13 and beyond. So rather than wildcarding them out in game week 9 and then bringing them back in 13, what you can do is transfer them out starting in game week 9 and then wildcard them back in 13. So it's almost like a role reversal of what you're doing with game week 9. Right, so rather than wildcarding and then transfers, your transfers and then wildcarding. The reason I like that is around game week 13, myself included, and a lot of managers that have wildcarded earlier, we're going to be scrambling to bring back in Arsenal players, to bring back in Liverpool players, to bring back in Chelsea and Spurs players that we might have taken out. Whereas if you transfer them out slowly and then wildcard in game week 13, you're going to put yourself in a perfect position in the lead up to the World Cup. So it basically comes down to how does your team currently look? If you've already got the likes of a Zaha or Maddison, if you've maybe only got 2 Arsenal players, if maybe you've already dropped to Luis Diaz, if you've maybe got a team that's close to what a game week 9 wildcard would look like, I'd probably wait and wildcard in game week 13. But if your team's looking like mine with triple Brighton, triple Arsenal, triple Liverpool, with fixtures that are really rough coming up, maybe a couple of Leeds players, it probably makes more sense to wildcard in game week 9. So let me know down below, what are you currently planning for your wildcard? Is there a specific week that you're eyeing up? I think a lot of people are probably with me on a game week 9. I do really like the game week 13 wildcard though. So consider, can you get to what would be close to a game week 9 wildcard with a couple of transfers over the next few weeks? If you could, I genuinely would be tempted to wait until game week 13. So the final question is around, is big at the back dead? And it's a question that I knew we'd get at the start of the season. It's always the way. People go really big at the back, and then we start to shift away from that when some of the really decent options arise in like the midfield and the forwards. For example, like a Rodrigo and a Gross. We probably wouldn't have imagined that those two would provide good competition for the likes of a Robertson or a Cancelo. So is big at the back dead? What I've got here is I've got James, Robertson, Cancelo and Trent. I've got their underlying data, and I've also got the team data for obviously Chelsea, Liverpool and City. The reason for picking these 4 is I think they're the main 4 where people would say that's their big at the back defence. Yes, they might have like a Diaz or a Van Dijk as well, but this is just to give you a bit of an idea about the attacking underlying data from the defenders from an attacking perspective, their expected goal involvement, and also to give you a bit of an idea about how good the defences have been from the clubs which have obviously the expensive defenders. So I don't think big at the back's dead, but I do think a couple of the players that would be part of the big at the back have been underwhelming. So let's start with Reece James, because here's one that has not been underwhelming. As you can see here, projected points still really high from game week 7 to game week 12. His big chance involvement per 90, which is big chances plus big chances created. Right, so it's basically, are they involved in a big chance? He's getting 0.6 per 90. So every 2 games, assuming he plays 90 minutes in each of those, he's getting more than 1 big chance involvement across those 2 games. So whether that be creating a big chance or having a big chance. So by all accounts, that's very good for a wing back. And considering the chance for a clean sheet too, I'm very happy with that. And his non-penalty expected goal involvement is 0.37, which is actually roughly what we saw last season. So it looks fairly sustainable, I would say, for Reece James to continue to maintain around a 0.35 to 0.5 expected goal involvement based on what we've seen this season and last season. And he's constantly involved in big chance creation and also taking big chances or getting big chances himself as well. From a defensive perspective, though, Chelsea have been slightly underwhelming. So they're conceding 1.7 expected goals per 90, which is actually quite poor. It puts them in 11th. The only reason they're in 11th is because some defences have been even worse than that. But that is not promising underlying data from Chelsea there. And it would suggest that, yes, Reece James is great from an attacking perspective, especially especially now that he's going to be pushed into right wing back. Because remember, a lot of this data is from right centre back. So think about what he can achieve at right wing back. So I still think James is arguably one of the best options to own in defence at the moment. But the defensive data, the clean sheet likelihood, isn't great for Chelsea at the moment. I would say apply some context to this. They've now got Fofana signed. They've got Cucurella and Chilwell now coming back. I do believe Chilwell was a better defender and attacker than Cucurella. And they've got Koulibaly as well. So I think now that that back line is going to start to be a little bit more consistent, they've got everyone in their correct positions, I do think we'll see the data start to improve for Chelsea and probably for Reece James as well. So for me, Reece James is probably non-negotiable on Wildcard. I haven't built a single wildcard without Reece James. I sold him last week when he was ill. I kind of regret selling him. And as soon as I get the opportunity to bring Reece James back in, I 100% will be. The two disappointing players and the two main reasons that we might be saying big at the back is dead is actually Robertson and Cancelo around that £7 million price tag. Let's start with Robertson. 0 big chance involvement per 90. He's been involved in 0 big chances. No big chances created, no big chances for him. And his non-penalty expected goal involvement is 0.13. It's actually almost identical to Cancelo. So Cancelo, again, has been involved in 0 big chances, no big chances created, no big chances for him. And his non-penalty expected goal involvement is 0.12. To put that into perspective, how bad that is, that puts Robertson as 42nd in the league for expected goal involvement for only defenders. So for defenders in the Premier League, he's 42nd. I think Cancelo's about 50th-ish. That does take into account a few players with low expected minutes. But even if you get rid of the players with low expected minutes, Robertson and Cancelo are sat in like 30th, 40th for expected goal involvement. So they are not even getting close to justifying their price tag. And then the issue you have alongside the poor attacking data is that they're conceding goals left, right and centre. Liverpool and City have been conceding a lot of goals. Now, the data would suggest that City in particular, but Liverpool and City may have been unlucky to concede the amount they've conceded. Liverpool are still 5th in the Premier League for expected goals conceded, so they're still a decent defence, but 1.2 expected goals per 90 conceded is nowhere near as good as what we saw last season for Liverpool, and I think they're definitely missing Matip, and their defensive, the midfield injuries that they've had is having a serious impact on their defence as well. So maybe slightly unlucky not to keep more clean sheets. But when you couple that with how poor the attacking data has been for Robertson as well, for me, Robertson is definitely a sell. Something isn't right with Robertson. I don't think he justifies the £6.8 million price tag. So I think he's probably a sell. And I would argue Cancelo is a sell as well, but I would still want to get into the City defence. And the issue we've got is now with Champions League coming, and with obviously Gomez, the new signing, starting to get more minutes, is Walker as nailed as he was at the start of the season? Probably not, which poses a slight issue. And the defenders are still 6 million. Apart from Ake, who again has his injury issues as well, is he going to be nailed longer term? The likes of a Laporte or a Diaz across the season, they're going to be still quite expensive. You're only saving £1 million on Cancelo. So there aren't really many cheap ways into the City defence. Maybe go for an Edison, but I think there are better keepers that make more saves. So it's really tricky with City that they don't have a cheap way into their defence, because if they did, I'd be dropping Cancelo in a heartbeat. The underlying data is not good enough. 0.12 non-penalty expected goal involvement does not justify a £7 million price tag. But as you can see, they are still the best defence in the league from an expected goals conceded perspective, and I still expect them to keep the most clean sheets this season. It's just about whether we can find a slightly cheaper way into the City defence. And then just to finish with Trent, there has definitely been a notable downgrade on his attacking sort of underlying data from the previous season. 0.37 big chance involvement per 90 is down from last season. It's also almost half what Reece James is getting. So he's not as involved in those big chances as maybe we've seen in previous seasons. And then his non-penalty expecting goal involvement is dropped down to 0.3. And what we saw last season was he maintained throughout most of the season around a 0.45 non-penalty expected goal involvement. So there has definitely been a downgrade. There's been a decrease in Trent's numbers, but they're still pretty good. And I think when you look at how bad Robertson and Cancelo have been with their attacking data, I think Trent is probably not a priority to sell, especially when he's only slightly more than the likes of Robertson and Cancelo. So for me, at the moment, big at the back isn't necessarily dead, but I do think that Robertson and Cancelo, you could justify selling both, especially Robertson. For me, though, on a wild card, whether you wild card 7, 8, 9, or even 13, I can't imagine building a wild card without James and Trent. I think the data that they put up, the data they continue to put up, even when we say that they're struggling, even when Reece James is playing right centre-back and Trent's not playing that well, they're still putting up really good data. So I would keep James and Trent. I would maybe look at selling Robertson completely and getting off the double Liverpool defence. And with Cancelo, I would be looking, is there a cheaper way into the Man City defence? Let me know down below if you're starting to look to shift money out of your defence. And if you're on a wild card, let me know what your backline currently looks like. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 7 preview video done. I hope this has helped you with some of your key decisions and dilemmas for the upcoming week. And if this has provided any value for you whatsoever, I ask that you do two things. Please do subscribe. We are very close to 30,000 subscribers, and I would love to hit that before Game Week 7. And also make sure to drop a like on the video. We're continuing to set the like target of 1,000 likes on this video. So if it's not yet at 1,000 likes, and even if it is already, please do drop a like on the video. I really appreciate it. The next video will be coming out on Thursday, which will be my team selection. And as always, on Saturday, we'll have the deadline stream. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.